Welcome to the Foundations of the IEP training series. This recording is part of a series of videos on IEP compliance. Since IDEA was revised in 2004, measurable annual goals are more important than ever. Two of the purposes of IDEA 2004 are to improve educational results and to assess and ensure the effectiveness of education for students who have disabilities. Results and effectiveness means students are reaching goals. Recent court and due process hearing decisions show this increased attention to measurability and measuring. Focus a goal on each of a student's important unique educational needs. Be sure that each goal is properly aligned with its current present level of performance that appears in the findings of the IEP. For many students, there will be 2 to 5 major needs and therefore goals. The annual goal tells us what we expect the student to learn or be able to do in 1 year. The amount of progress should be reasonable, taking into account the student's ability and assuming appropriate, intensive, and effective individualized instruction. The annual goals also tell us how we will know when the student has reached that expectation. Every goal must have an observable behavior and a specific criteria against which the performance can be reliably assessed by multiple evaluators. Beware of repeating the same goal year after year. If progress is being assessed at least quarterly, as it must be, and it appears the student is not going to meet a goal, something must be changed. The changes that need to take place may be that the services being provided or the goal itself, if the team determines it was inappropriate to begin with. The annual goals will guide instruction and serve as a basis to measure progress and report to parents and serve as guideposts to determine if the supports and services being provided to the student are appropriate and effective. Goals should include academic and functional areas if needed. Begin by analyzing the student's present levels of performance. The present levels describe areas of need arising from the student's disability. Goals should be directed at meeting a student's needs related to the disability so that they can be involved in and progress in the general curriculum. IEP goals should enable the student to learn the basic skills that are necessary for the student to be independent and self-sufficient. The essential characteristics of IEP goals are that they must be measurable and they must be measured. If an IEP goal is not measurable, it violates the IDEA and may result in the denial of FAPE. If a goal is not measured, it violates the IDEA and may result in the denial of FAPE. The IEP must describe how the student's progress toward the annual goals will be measured. A goal must be meaningful, measurable, able to be monitored, and useful in decision making. The annual goal is meaningful if it specifies a level of performance and an expectation that is reasonable. A goal is measurable if it reflects performance or behavior that can be measured or observed. Measurement procedures identify the method that will be used to measure and determine if the student has met the goal. A measurement procedure must provide an objective method in which the student's behavior will be measured or observed. Objective criteria that enable progress to be monitored and allow for determination of the point at which the objective has been accomplished include things like 95% accuracy, fewer than 5 times a day, 50 correct responses in 1 minute, 4 out of 5 trials correct on 3 consecutive days. Measurement procedures include things like curriculum-based measures, written performance, oral performance, criterion reference tests, time sample, teacher-made tests. And schedules to determine how often the objective will be measured include things like every 2 weeks, twice a month, once a month, every 6 weeks, or every 9 weeks. The IEP must include a schedule for reporting progress to the student's parents as often as students in the general education get their report cards. Every measurable goal must allow a clear yes or no determination of whether or not it has been achieved. Terms such as will improve, will increase, and will decrease are not specific enough to describe what it is the student is expected to do within 1 year. To be measurable, a behavior must be observable and be able to be counted. In general, it is recommended that goals describe what the student will do as opposed to what the student will not do. It needs to tell evaluators what to do to determine if the goal is achieved without adding anything to the goal. And finally, it must pass the stranger test. Different evaluators can agree if the goal has been achieved. Components of a measurable goal include 1. A target behavior, what we want to change. The behavior clearly identifies the performance being monitored, such as Jeremy will read aloud. 2. The stimulus material or conditions, or how we're going to measure the change. A condition would be something that describes what must be present for the student to demonstrate the skill or behavior at the expected level of performance. When presented with a passage from a second grade curriculum would be an example. 3. The criterion for acceptable performance. This is how we will know if the goal has been achieved. This is the level of proficiency. How many, how often, to what standards the behavior must occur, such as 48 words per minute with less than 2 errors. Or measurement, as measured by weekly 1-minute oral reading fluency probes. And fourth, it needs to include a time frame. For instance, by the end of the 2012-13 school year, or by the end of the IEP, or by the end of the quarter. Target behaviors are what we want to change, and it clearly identifies the performance being monitored. The example used earlier was Jeremy will read aloud. This is observable, measurable, verifiable, and repeatable. It's not something invisible, internal, or open to any interpretations. Some other examples may include Jim will write 10 sentences with correct punctuation. Terry will solve multi-step word problems. Brianna will stand 2 feet away from the other person while talking. Lisa will walk 10 feet independently. Ron will point independently to pictures described. Jose will use prediction software to write essays. Now, these examples are only of the behavior. These are not standalone goals. They are simply the component of the target behavior within a goal. The second part of a goal is the conditions or the given. This is how you will measure the target behavior. This describes what must be present for the student to demonstrate the skill or behavior at the expected level of performance. An example of a given would include when presented with a passage from a second grade curriculum. Criteria for acceptable performance is how we will know if the goal has been achieved. It's the level of proficiency. It's how many, how often, to what standards the behavior must occur. That is the 48 words per minute and with less than 2 errors. It's the measurement, is the as measured by weekly 1 minute oral reading fluency probes. Evaluative criteria identify how well and over what period of time the student must perform a behavior in order for it to consider to be met. How well the student does something could include examples of frequency, like 9 out of 10 trials, duration for 20 minutes, distance, 20 feet, or accuracy, 90% accuracy. A period of time a skill or behavior must occur could be measured in terms such as the number of days, over 3 consecutive days, the number of weeks, over a 4-week period, occasions, so on 6 consecutive occasions. An objective criteria will enable progress to be monitored and allow for a determination of a point in which the objective has been accomplished. And collection cannot be subjective opinion. It must be data. Here we show a graph that includes the 3 components of our goals: the target, the condition, and the criteria. This is something that works well, a tool that works well when you are writing your goals to make sure that you have all of the appropriate things in your goal. Annual goals or objectives cannot have mastery statements that say things like, as evidenced by an increase in MAP by 5 points, or as evidenced by passing the pass, as measured by passing a passing grade in math, or as measured by a final grade of 83% in English. Or another example would be as shown by a standard score increase of 5 points on the Woodcock-Johnson, or by meeting 4 out of 5 of the short-term objectives. For all the measurements above, MAP, pass, whatever exit exam we'll be using now, grades in class, the Woodcock-Johnson, the scores reflected a global score and not a specific skill deficit. A RIT score cannot tell you if the child can tell time on a clock. The MAP, the PASS, and the HSAP and the Woodcock-Johnson are not meant to be given 4 times a year, which is at least how often we need to be measuring goals and sending home progress reports. Remember, for any student that participates in the SC-ALT or the alternative assessment, the IEP team must develop goals and objectives for any area of need identified in the findings and present levels section. Some considerations to think about when writing goals or when measuring the compliance of goals is to ask yourself, are the goals measurable? Does it include all 3 components? Are the goals too broad or too vague? Do the goals misuse percentages? Are the goals ambitious but realistic? Do the goals align with the present levels and services? Check all annual goals for compliance by asking these questions or using this as a checklist. Are the goals linked to the assessment and the present level findings? Are the goals specific, clear, and measurable? Does the goals section of the IEP contain information on how the student's progress will be measured? Does the IEP information state how progress will be communicated to the student's parents? Is the student's progress towards achieving the goals actually measured? Here is a screenshot of how the goals section looks in Enrich. Be sure you are completing out each section in its entirety. Completing the entire section in Enrich will help to ensure compliance. Let's finish with some examples of compliant goals. In blank weeks, given a blank grade level reading passage, the student will read aloud your goal, words corrected in 1 minute on 3 consecutive trials as measured by curriculum-based measures. Or an example for writing would include, in X number of weeks, when given a story starter and 3 minutes to write, the student will write, insert your goal, correct word sequences on 3 out of 4 attempts as measured by curriculum-based measures. And here's one final example for math. In X number of weeks, when given a randomly selected worksheet of multiplication problems, the student will write blank correct digits in 2 minutes on 3 consecutive trials as measured by curriculum-based measures. You can see highlighted in the different colors the 3 components and what needs to happen within each goal. This was the foundations of the IEP training series on annual goals. For more information on IEP compliance, please review our trainings on meeting notices, present levels, findings, progress monitoring, services, transition, and prior written notice. This training was intended to be a good starting point to find compliance in the annual goals section of your IEP in the South Carolina Public School District, and is not intended to be a comprehensive list of things needed for IEPs.